So, hello, and thank you very much for coming along to hear about which campaigns nailed it. In fact, wanting to know more about effectiveness generally on YouTube and who was really nailing it is why I wanted to get involved in the 2018 YouTube Works for Brands Awards in the first place. It's been an absolute pleasure chairing these awards in their second year. And I think anybody who's heard me talk or tweet or write on these award schemes understands that I think it's critically important, given the scale and reach of this platform, that we do now have an annual award scheme set up to recognise best-in-class effectiveness on YouTube. And I think it's important, before we kick off today, that when we talk about effectiveness for YouTube Works, we really mean it. These are not awards for clicks or views. They're for actions that people went on in the real world to do, having clicked or viewed. And time again, what we saw in these awards were brands who, when those people had gone on to do something, had huge commercial or cultural change as a result. So let's have a quick look at some of this year's winners. I'd like to welcome to the stage some of the other judges I was lucky enough to judge with this year. So Jen Smith, who is one of London's finest media minds, who has just recently started her own agency, Craft Media. If you would like to come up. Kevin Chesters, somewhat of a Renaissance man, having served very effectively with client and agency side, and currently Chief Strategy Officer at O&M. And Will Wally from Google, who actually is the brainchild of these awards in the first place. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I'm here all week.
So to kick off, I always find when I'm judging awards that I normally get to one case or one paper and I think, damn it, I wish I'd thought of that. So much as all of this year's winners show real effectiveness, I'd like to ask you first, Jen, what for you was the paper where you thought, damn it, that's an idea I'd like to have had?
So my one that gave me little shivers was the BT case study. And at the moment, there's a lot of debate in Twitter, especially today, about creativity and data, and are they friends or are they enemies? And when I read this, I thought they've got it right, because it was not about using data to come up with these insights, because data was fact, but what they used them for was ingredients, and then they handed those ingredients over to the creative agency, and they just cooked up something that was really delicious. And I thought, that's it. That makes me jealous. That's how we merge.
It was data as creative fuel as well as planning insight, wasn't it? Yeah. Kevin.
Thank you, Alison. Glad you asked me. Hello, everyone. You'll probably hear a lot about this campaign this week, actually. It was the Bodyform Blood Normal campaign. Couple of reasons, really. I think the clues in the name, I think, with the YouTube Works Awards, you know, it was actually sort of people, rather than just people entering papers that they'd entered into everything. I thought was really useful about this was it was a campaign that literally couldn't exist without YouTube, because all like the mainstream media and various things wouldn't touch it. So first off, it was a brilliant use. One of the judges, can't remember who, said if YouTube didn't exist, they'd have to invent it for a campaign like this, which I thought was brilliant. And I think the other thing with that campaign was I think it showed what happens when you've got a brilliant client-agency relationship. So I met them all on the night when we handed out the awards, and they clearly like each other, they trust each other, therefore they'll take a risk with each other, and I think that's why it led to something brilliant. So that was...
Will?
Can I do two?
You can.
I'll do two. So I think the first one for me that really stood out, I think Heineken was brilliant. It was one of the, I mean, hearing Josh Spanier talk earlier, when he talked about making ads that people care about, it felt to me like that was one of these campaigns that actually got out into kind of the public consciousness in a way that most ad campaigns never do. I think it was a brilliant idea. Absolutely, founded on a kind of truth of the product, but really tied to the kind of more divided than ever kind of zeitgeist, and then pushed brilliantly through the media mix in a really, intelligent way, and absolutely used YouTube at its heart. And you saw the guy in the film talking about how YouTube was critical to the campaign. And then I think the other one I thought was really interesting and kind of surprised me was Superdry, because that's a campaign, and I'd urge you to have a look at the case studies that are all online. The that campaign really showed how YouTube kind of is now bridging both a kind of a brand activation world right the way through to a sales world. So that kind of through the funnel, using kind of a lot of the new, more kind of performance-orientated products that we've got now, I thought was a really smart way of using the platform, and really shows how advertisers are using the platform in new ways.
Yeah, and that was one of those papers that I know it was funny when I was briefing all the judges before the judging day, one of the things I said is, why have you turned up, why are you doing this? And it was very much because people felt that they wanted to learn more about how they could use YouTube, and I think there was real sense on that day that Superdry, the way in which they were using data and tracking it right through to the retail experience was something new. But even I think in everyone's personal favourites, I think already you begin to see that through judging this, one of the things you really walk away with is that there isn't one way, there are so many different ways. So the joy of something like BT, where you could be searching, a cricket fan might be searching for Tenerife, and up would come, Jeff Boycott telling him not to be doing anything other than searching for Ashes, feels really personal and one-to-one and hugely targeted. But at the same time, things like Bodyform and Heineken were absolutely about using YouTube as a collective platform for conversation. So I thought that was just a range of your damn it moments. So if those were kind of the bits you've zoned in on as your favourite papers, did you get any sense of themes across everything that we judged? So for example, much as I sort of knew this before I judged these awards, it sounds obvious, because we've all seen YouTube give a voice to lots of influencers and artists that we wouldn't have heard of. But actually, I was really surprised by the extent to which it could give a voice to brands that I just don't think would have cut through under pretty much any other channel. So something like Bodyform, which was outspent 3 or 4 to 1 if it had been in TV, #1 social share of voice, massive global conversation about that brand. And there were other examples. So for me, that was something I knew, but I hadn't really thought about applying that to some of the businesses I work on. Was that the same for other people, or did you have different themes that emerged? Kevin, do you want to?
I think to go back to that, that thing of bravery is one thing. I think that emerged. I think you saw when people took risks, they tended to be the better papers, I thought. 2 other things I think were themes that came out. One was, again, just to see how important it is to kind of get into social or cultural relevance.
Yeah.
I think you saw when people had something and then it got picked up and people talked about it and passed it around, and it was a great medium for that. I think the other thing, probably as I wander down the beach and I see sort of Spotify and Pinterest and Google and whatever, I thought one of the things I thought was really interesting was still to see, encouraging to see, that still creativity was still the key and was still the king, but it's just the technology massively amplified and accelerated it. I think it was those 2 things working together, a bit like, like you've got sort of the wheels and the engine of a car, and they kind of make sense apart, but they make a damn sight more sense when they work together to one aim. So I think it was just seeing the power of creativity was great in most of those cases.
Yeah.
And like you say, even the tiny brands, like there was people who spent, low 4 figures of campaigns, but did brilliant things with using the medium. So that was good.
Jen?
Well, mine's obviously a media planning point of view, in that the theme for me was there's no one way to do YouTube anymore. YouTube traditionally might have been the thing that you got sort of reach. Make something over here, use YouTube to reach people across the internet. And there were so many campaigns that it wasn't a distribution channel that it was used for, it was an inception channel. So whether that was from insight or the idea actually lived wholly there, but it became way more than just this way of just putting it on the internet and reaching people. And I just thought that was really, from a geeky media planner point of view, you can start having fun now when people are starting using it that way.
Yeah.
I think for me, there was a big theme around that sort of shift from maybe people initially seeing YouTube as video and thinking, well, video, that's kind of a brand sort of channel, and putting it in that sort of box mentally, to people now, as I mentioned with Superdry, sort of seeing YouTube as having a potential role at lots of different stages of the funnel, even down into more performance places. So that kind of broadening out, I think, was really interesting, and I think it plays very much to the way we're talking about YouTube now as being more than just viewers. It's very much predicated on attention and having a kind of superior audience attention. I think the fact that we're able to see papers that really demonstrate the actions people took, actually going to buy something, increase sales, app downloads, you heard the Hostelworld guy talking about, really demonstrates kind of proof of concept that this is a platform where people are really engaged in a way that they may be less so elsewhere.
Yeah. I think the Hostelworld, which actually was Breakthrough Client of the Year and was also the Grand Prix, I think was really interesting because I think it picks up on a number of those things. So the whole thing about creativity, but also, the technology. So they had a really clever app which allowed you to be able to talk to anybody wherever you were in the world. But at the same time, actually, it won the Grand Prix because of good old storytelling, but very cleverly native storytelling. And so I think a lot of that did come through in something like the hostel world, both of their papers, even through to, again, right through the journey. So 20% increase in bookings. And I think it was interesting because I think I was going to ask you, Will, because I've obviously read last year's papers coming into it this year. But do you see different themes? Now we're in our second year. Are there any different themes you think that are emerging?
One thing that was really interesting, I think, was this move from, I think initially, and this kind of goes back to what Jen was talking about, I think people saw YouTube as largely a kind of content distribution platform, and it was a place to put stuff that wasn't necessarily advertising. And yes, we still have campaigns that do that very well, or campaigns like Heineken that kind of almost straddle a world, but they've got one foot in the content world and one foot in the advertising world. They're somewhere in between. But I think increasingly we're seeing people really lean into the advertising formats that are part of the platform, and particularly from the kind of the media angle, as the platforms got more sophisticated and there are more product options there to deliver against different sorts of goals and objectives, I think we're really seeing the industry kind of leaning into that and skill up and become far better attuned to the possibilities that the platform enables.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things this year, I think it was something that you said, Jen, on the day or subsequently, was this thought around you kind of come into it. And I think last year, quite a lot of the big winners had done really kind of novel breakthrough content ideas, whether it was sort of episodic football idea, or whether it was Mattison's allowing people, building a machine that allowed you to game as you ate, and then training coding. But I think this year you began to see it wasn't just things that were different. I think you said this thing which was you kind of walk away going, all of these cases are good. It's not that they're different, they're just all really good. And I think that was a key learning for me as well, not to be frightened that you have to do stuff. It allows you to do really different stuff, and that's fantastic. But actually sometimes it is about good old storytelling, about amplifying that elsewhere. So thinking about what you took away with you from these awards, when you go back to your client or your agencies, what do you think the kind of key things you learnt are that you'll be bringing back with you? Kevin, I don't think you've gone first yet, surprisingly.
Oh, amazing. I think it was more something I was encouraged by, I think, than a learning. It was great to see. I loved the EE paper. So seeing 3 years of a campaign build and get better, and the results get better year on year on year using the platform. And I think it was brilliant. The key learning for me on that just was that, long-term brilliant storytelling. Long-term investment in brand. And it goes again to a good client, building that relationship with the agency over, first year, then not just resting on the laurels, taking the ideas somewhere different the second year, building and taking it somewhere better the third year. So I just loved that long-term investment in brand, still working despite, it being on a new media platform. I thought that was great. And again, just that thing of bravery, which was, you see it, that maybe it's because it's still, even though it's like now 10, 12 years old as a platform, still maybe because people see it as a new media, maybe people are more likely to take a risk than maybe on traditional channels where there's a lot more sort of people watching what you're doing. So I just think, take a risk, be brave, and I just think that client-agency relationship thing seemed to come through again. It was just invest for the long term, I think, not the short term.
There was this was like the third year it had run, and there was a sort of sense in the judging day of, do we award it again because it won? But the kind of results between year 2 and year 3 were like exponential. Something like 30,000 people at the end of it were willing to pay money to go to the actual, branded event at Wembley.
Run around. Yeah, I mean, amazing.
For me, media strategy in channel is back. It's what I took out. It gave me a little sense of joy. Strategy has become so heavy, really, so unreachable and untouchable, that doing these awards, and what sort of gave me joy was actually teeth to toes planning in channel. So the work for Hostel World was just brilliant. Everything from understanding about clickbait titles to how your thumbnail looks to how you're using different formats. It was beautifully crafted strategy in channel that, to be honest, I haven't seen in a long while, and I'm just dead excited about making something beautiful in the craft of creating it.
Yeah.
I think for me the big theme, and it was, and also my big outtake was really the flexibility of the platform now. I think as it's kind of matured, as Kevin said, it's been around for a while now, and I think yes, it's sophisticated, but I think that's now giving us so many more options with regards to how advertisers and agencies can use the platform, be that for content, for advertising, be that long form or short form, be that big brands like the Heinekens and the EEs, or small brands. So there was, we had a Robinson's Brewery entering a paper there, and I'm from Stockport in the northwest of England, and Robinson's Brewery is very, very small regional brewers. I think, as Kev said, they invested like £3,000 and they got back something like 21,000. That was an 80% increase in sales.
We didn't actually believe that this could actually be true. So on the day, everyone was like ripping it apart, going, "There's just no way they spent 3,000 or 5,000 and increased it with, particularly when they just lost distribution." So we were almost just on not believing believing this fact. So we said we've got to go back to them and call them up, and called up this little tiny brewery in Stockport.
And it was true.
YouTube on the phone. Can you please confirm that actually nothing changed in pricing, packaging? So that sense of some of the smaller budget that could really cut through.
And I think that was amazing for me, because and internally, speaking with a kind of Google hat on, I think with it internally we've often thought of like search is our platform that's kind of that reaches the long tail, and I think what's interesting about that case of Robinson's Brewery is sort of that to me said now maybe we've got another platform that's potentially going to start moving into that long tail, as well as even smaller advertisers start adopting video through YouTube.
Yeah, and I think for me it was just the gold mine that is the data, in terms of how much you can really. I think your BT example at the beginning, that was the one I read, and I didn't just read it and go, "This is brilliant." I kind of read it and went and give it to a team that I work with and said, "Why aren't we doing stuff like this?" It's really brilliant, and the way in which you can mine the data. Certainly, I wasn't as close to. It was the kind of key learning that I walked away with. So one last final quick question. Having judged YouTube this year, how, if at all, did your perception of YouTube change? Jen, do you want to?
So I really enjoyed judging it. If I'm honest, I was expecting how my perception changed. I went into it thinking I was going to see lots of just really great creative work that wouldn't be able to be seen anywhere else. And so it was put on YouTube and it was delivered, like very much a creative forward papers that were put in. And I didn't see that at all. I saw some really lovely strategic, insighty data, effectiveness awards. So I think the fact that that's what I thought I was going to see, and it's not what I saw, that's how my perception changed, is that it's not just for this amazing creative work that unleashes all of the restraints, a place to put it on. It's actually a place to do some really good, insightful and effective planning.
Great. Kevin?
I mean, I don't think my opinion particularly changed. It was always pretty high. I think one of the things that was good from the awards, I mean, to agree with Jen, I was expecting that I would just see APG papers or IPA papers on YouTube, and so I was really, really impressed with just how people had specifically used the medium, and I think that's obviously, the ones that got the special awards and various things were specific uses. I think it's just given, for any of the sort of naysayers or, anybody who sort of, moans and sniffs, I think, at a channel, I think it's just given, as I suppose was the intention, it's given me, a lot more ammunition to sort of go away and, educate thyself. There's sort of, there's great cases there, and obviously I'd urge all of you to go away and read them. I mean, they're all brilliant. They're all really good. They don't take long to read. You'll learn something from every one of them. They're all brilliant.
Well, is there anything that you'll bring back to Google HQ? Almost from seeing how the judges reacted in the room.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously it's fantastic for us even just to expose sort of industry luminaries like the people sat here, and there were other judges too, another 8 in fact, I think. Just a real great variety of YouTube campaigns, so people can see how the platform's working in lots of different ways, and maybe it inspires them to go and think about it in a different way. But yeah, I feel personally it's absolutely it's a vindication, I feel, of how we've positioned the platform in the market as being about more than just viewers. That's quite a high bar to kind of claim that. And actually, when you look across the campaigns that we've had submitted for YouTube Works for brands, actually it completely bears that out. So often it's quite difficult when you create something and you're very close to it, like that kind of brand positioning. You sort of slightly concerned, like, are people going to buy this? Is it true?
Yeah.
And actually, you put it out to the market, and what you get back tells you, yes, you were right.
Yeah.
And it really is more than just viewers.
And I'd just echo your point, Kevin, which is who dares wins. And I think it just encouraged me, definitely, to be braver. So I'd just like to thank everyone here for coming along to hear this today. As you've said, they're all available online, and I'd urge you and the people that work with and for you to read them, because there really are some gems that will allow us to do differently. Thank you to our judges for taking part this year, and thank you to Google for asking me to do it. Have a fantastic rest of the day and week in Cannes. Thank you.